For anyone who wants to follow along, this is Surah number 3, Surah Ali Imran, and I'm starting at verse 162. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أفمن اتبع رضوان الله كمن باء بسخط من الله ومأواه جهنم وبئس المصير هم درجات عند الله والله بصير بما يعملون لقد من الله على المؤمنين إذ بعث فيهم رسولا من أنفسهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين أولما أصابتكم مصيبة قد أصبتم مثليها قلتم أن هذا قل هو من عند أنفسكم إن الله على كل شيء قدير وما أصابكم يوم التقى الجمعان فبإذن الله وليعلم المؤمنين وليعلم الذين نافقوا وقيل لهم تعالوا قاتلوا في سبيل الله أو ادفعوا قالوا لو نعلم قتالا لاتبعناكم هم للكفر يومئذ أقرب منهم للإيمان يقولون بأفواههم ما ليس في قلوبهم والله أعلم بما يكتمون الذين قالوا لإخوانهم وقعدوا لو أطاعونا ما قتلوا قل فادرءوا عن أنفسكم الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أمواتا بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون فرحين بما آتاهم الله من فضله ويستبشرون بالذين لم يلحقوا بهم من خلفهم ألا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون يستبشرون بنعمة من الله وفضل وأن الله لا يضيع أجر المؤمنين الذين استجابوا لله والرسول من بعد ما أصابهم القرح للذين أحسنوا منهم واتقوا أجر عظيم الذين قال لهم الناس إن الناس قد جمعوا لكم فاخشوهم فزادهم إيمانا وقالوا حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My condolences to you all on these grave nights. Sorry. Thank you, Brother Mohsen, for the beautiful Quran recitation tonight. And tomorrow night, we're going to have Syed Zeshum Ahmed, who flew in from Canada to give us a great speech. He has been in Qom since 2013 and has been I guess he flew from Qom for the month of Muharram, but from Canada more recently. And we're lucky to have him speaking here for the next 2 nights. So please invite him up with a loud salawat. Allah.
Inshallah, before we start, we can remember all of our marhameen, the marhameen of everyone who has helped us and paved the way for us to become and be in the place that we are right now. And inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them a great place in Jannah amongst the Shuhada Karbala. ببركاته صلوات على محمد وآل محمد in Surah Al-Fatiha. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. آمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. روحي وأرواحنا لتراب مقدمه الفداء، فقد قال الله في كتابه المجيد: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. من كان يريد العزة فلله العزة جميعا، إليه يسعد الكلم الطيب والعمل الصالح يرفعه. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. For the sake of the hastening of the reappearance of our Imam, please recite a louder salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so we are among the first to hear the call and receive the Imam upon his return. Please recite the loudest of salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. First and foremost, I'd like to say it's a great honor and dignity for myself to have this opportunity to be in a gathering such as yourselves, a gathering of mu'mineen. No matter how many times we have this opportunity to be in each other's presence, we shouldn't take it for granted that this is a great blessing. This is one of the biggest blessings that we are afforded in our lives, is the company and presence of each other. And so it is, a great, great blessing and tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for me personally to be here and to be able to speak in front of you. Inshallah, my point and my intention is not to sort of speak as if this is ultimately my place to be here in front of you, but rather, inshallah, there's a few words and things pieces of advice that I'm mainly aiming towards myself. And inshallah, if you benefit as well, then alhamdulillah, that's good as well. That being said, before I actually even talk about it, I'd like to mention that, it is slightly strange for me to be here in the Bay Area, seeing as my journey into the Hawza somewhat started from the Bay Area as well. I was studying here in university long time ago, and it was in the middle of my sort of university sort of period of studying that I decided to go to Hawza, and so I had left my degree, and I started Hawza studies in 2013 from that time. And so it's a bit of like almost double vision for myself. We're sort of seeing that. I mean, I've visited Saba Center before at that time when I was a student over here, and now I'm over here many years later, more than a decade later, sort of speaking over here as well. And so it's a bit of a strange experience for myself, but it's something that again reminds us that that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala pulls us and puts us in paths and destinations that we can't really tell in advance. Nobody knows where the trajectory of their life will take them. And it's a fallacy, one of the greatest fallacies that we tell each other, tell ourselves even, that we can sort of determine and outline our path in life and determine it based on our will alone. That's not something that's possible. We do our best, we plan, we do things based on our intellect, we do things based on advice, and we try to do things wisely. But ultimately all affairs, all of the things are in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands. And we have no ultimate control over that. And that's something that we have to accept, that in this world it's not our lives, it's not our destination. Everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's. Now on that note of understanding and realizing this sort of reality that exists between ourselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, want to see what various structures exist within our lives, within Islam, that has afforded us to come to that deeper realization. One of the things, the great things that we have going for us, and one of the great advantages that we have, are these majalis that we have, these sessions of mourning that we have and we come together. It's one of the great blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a great blessing, as any blessing, it being there on its own is not sufficient. It's not something that just by its presence it's enough. What matters is what we do with it. Right? As the famous line from Hazrat Sulaiman says that when he sees the throne of Bilqis sort of transported before a blink of an eye, he says, "Hada min fadli Rabbi." Right? This is from the grace of my Lord. But then he doesn't stop there and just say that. He says, this is a grace from my Lord, but there's a purpose. لِيَبْلُوَنِي, to test me. Am I going to be thankful or am I going to be ungrateful? And if I'm thankful, then it's for me. And if I'm ungrateful, well, that doesn't harm Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the slightest. And so this blessing that we're afforded, we have to see, are we being grateful for it or not? And gratitude for any blessing exists in us using it in the purpose that it is there for. The purpose of these majlis a'za is of course to mourn. The primary thing that we do is mourning. That is the ultimate and obvious purpose that we're doing, is that we are mourning the great tragedies that occurred. But mourning is something that happens after recognition. It's not something that happens before it. If I don't know what happened, if I don't know who it happened to, if I didn't know what that person stood for, then my mourning isn't really mourning of that person. It's a mourning of a mental construct, something that I've imagined. And so we have to make our mourning real. Now, if we want an easy test to see, is our mourning of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and his family and all of the companions, is it actually true mourning or not? Then we should see, are our actions and our beliefs, our way of seeing reality, is it becoming closer to what the Imams did and how they acted and how they saw reality, or is it becoming further away? And that's the ultimate test. Because love and devotion and care, if it truly exists between a pair of people, then it draws them together. Naturally, they start to act like each other. They start to talk like each other. They adopt each other's criteria of success. They adopt each other's principles. because that's what that feeling does. And so if I actually have love for Imam Hussein alayhi salam, then what these majalis should be doing, what each tear I shed should be doing, is making me more and more similar to him. My actions should resemble him. Now on that line, what we want to achieve and accomplish in these majalis, obviously in an ideal world, perhaps, you wouldn't have a speaker come and give a lecture at this time. In an ideal world, perhaps you would only have aza, you would only have the poetry, you would only have the musibah being mentioned, you would only have the latmiya, and that's the only thing you perhaps would do at this time. It's a time of mourning. Naturally, you spend it mourning. Now, we don't live in that ideal world. And so in an unideal world, this also happens to be one of the few times that as communities that we gather together and we all have a good number of people come together. And so it affords us an opportunity that we have to take advantage of and to use to sort of spread the knowledge of Islam. But that's as a fact of an unideal world. But that being said, what kind of things should be said and mentioned, right? Me who I'm speaking, if I'm trying to analyze myself as I'm speaking, what should I be talking about? Is it that I'm on this place to sort of entertain and sort of get these sort of, interesting tidbits of information that were never heard before, some sort of small pieces of historical information, some, rare opinion of some random scholar that you've never heard, is that what I'm here to sort of entertain with random pieces of trivia? Obviously, from the way that I presented that option, it's not something that we find, very useful. The point of these majalis, if it's supposed to transform us, to push us, to change us, to becoming different and better, then the lecture, the words that are being said should also be in the similar line. That what we talk about should be changing us, pushing us to be different. And nobody likes to be changed from what they're comfortable with. And so a lecture that's proper, in my opinion, is something that should feel uncomfortable for the audience. It should not be something that they just sit easy, nod their head, to say, wow, that was a great speech, and then just leave. No. In my opinion, a lecture that's appropriate is something that should leave the audience, the people who are listening, even myself, uncomfortable, uneasy with the state of affairs, wanting things to become different. And if that's not the case, if everything that is being said is just encouraging a status quo, well then, that's missing the point. The whole thing was to change, to become different, to evolve. Islam is not a religion of stasis and stagnancy, of becoming and staying the same. No. The famous statement of Marx that religion is the opium of the masses. No, Islam is the complete, absolute contradiction of that. It's supposed to be always and always constantly moving and changing. Not a moment should be spent at ease. There's a narration that a person came across Imam Sajjad alayhi salam while he was in the masjid and he was crying, right? He was weeping, right? The person comes up to him and says that, look at who your father is, your mother, your grandparents. Right? You don't need this prayer, right? It's not like it's for you. The Imam responds by saying, "Da'ani hadithu abi wa ummi wa jaddi, inna janna lil muttaqeen." Right? He says that, throw away this talk of my father and my mother and my grandfather. He says heaven is for the ones who have taqwa. You have to work for it. It's not free. If the Imam is saying that, then we who claim to be his followers should be doing it 10 times as much. Should be doing it infinite times as much. And so, staying as we are, where we are, is never going to be a proper goal and solution to our lives. That isn't to say that we should just throw away existing structures, completely criticize. No. We need to recognize the good things of where we are. Alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing to be in the situation we're in, to be around each other, to have the opportunities that we're afforded, to be able to openly commemorate and condole each other on these occasions, to have the opportunity of great scholars, not myself, but actual scholars coming and talking and sort of informing us and teaching us. It's definitely a lot of things that need to be thankful for and grateful for. But gratitude doesn't mean to stop. It means to push forward. And so this is where we have to have our expectations shifted. We should have to have the readiness in our hearts to change. If what we want to hear is only what we already know, then that means we've already determined ourselves to be the ultimate say about our lives. And it's a great expression of arrogance to say that. We should never have that attitude. Never. No matter who we are. No matter what size turban you wear. Right? It doesn't matter. Always in a state of learning. Always. Always in a state of change. Never stopping. That's what we want to talk about though. In some way. Now, the way that I want to sort of address this today and tomorrow is to look a bit more closely at our relationship between ourselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And from that, see how it can change, first and foremost, our perspectives. And then, after that, how that has a correlating effect on our actions, practically within our lives. And this is something that, we miss a lot. It seems like it should be an obvious thing. But it's something that for some reason that we miss. That the different aspects and teachings within Islam are not disparate and, secluded into different categories. We teach it like that, and that makes sense to teach it like that, especially to children, as in like there is an aqaid, there's an akhlaq, there's ahkam, and we teach it in those sort of things. There's beliefs, and then there's red lines, and then there's ethics and characteristics. Yeah, that makes sense to a certain extent to teach it like that. But what we see slowly happening is that this idea becomes inculcated within ourselves that whatever we've learned in terms of our aqaid is just that, right? As in, when we were growing up, we said, Allah ek, like there's one God, right? And then we never went past that, right? And even though 20 years passed, 30 years, 40, 50, the rest of our years passed, we're still, if you ask at the level of beliefs where we're at, and we just say, okay, God is one. And that's it, right? The belief didn't change. As if we're thinking that that's it. That's all it is about. No, that's not it. That's not it at all. It's as if, you go to a mathematician, right, who's claiming that, my whole life surrounds the principle of 1 + 1 = 2, right? That's what all of the mathematics is based on. But you ask them what they know, what's changed for them. Well, when they were a young kid, they knew 1 + 1 = 2. And all the way as they're adult, they're still only saying 1 + 1 = 2. Right? And they're claiming to have built their life on that. Well, that's not very convincing. It's not convincing if that's the only thing they know about math. The same thing in realization should be about ourselves. Is that if the only thing that we know about Tawheed is just the statement that there is one God, and that's it, well then that's not very convincing as a pillar of our religion. And if you look at the amount of stress Islam has put upon the concept of Tawheed, of saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is singular, then you see it can't just be that. Right? Tawheed is everything within our religion. It's the first thing, it's the last thing. Every single action that we're asked to do, every single thing that we're asked not to do, all goes back to Tawheed. All of the characteristics that we talk about in terms of akhlaq and what we should do and the mannerisms that we should have in our interactions and relations, they all go back to Tawheed. Everything, from the smallest to the greatest thing that we have within our religion, is about Tawheed. And nothing is outside of that. Right? That changes things. If we think about it in terms of that, right, then it changes our perspective about our religion. Right? Because previously, if we talked about, okay, why do I pray? Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Yeah, we have the answer that God said so, and then so I have to do it. And then there's some reward and punishment, and so I have to do it. And yes, that exists, and that is a basic truth. But there's more fundamental things that are happening, more deeper reality that's happening. Examine prayer. Right? Prayer is something that is and should be the pillar of our days. As in, our days should be centered around prayer. Alhamdulillah, we live in a time and age where we can already tell in advance when prayer time will be. Right? It's not some great mystery what time the Dhuhr time will be tomorrow. No, we can open up an app and we can know. Right? It's not some big deal to figure out. But what are we doing in prayer? Have we ever stopped and thought about it? Thought to ourselves that what are we doing when we pray? That we're coming before an entity, an existence that has said that is controlled everything, is the master of everything, the Lord of everything, the creator of everything, the manager of everything. Infinitely wise, infinitely giving, infinitely merciful, infinitely kind. And that entity, that existence is telling me, this insignificant speck of dust, that whatever you want, ask of me and I'll give. أدعوني فاستجب لكم. إذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان. If my servant asks you of me, then I am close. I respond to the caller of the call when they call. That's what we're in front of. That's what we're doing when we're praying. It's a real thing that's happening. It's a conversation that's happening. The most important, life-changing conversation we can imagine is happening on a daily basis 5 times a day. But how do we treat it? Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we're all amongst the ones who at least pray. Alhamdulillah, it's a great thing. But let's not trick ourselves and deceive ourselves as if we've accomplished it, we've done it. No. There's a lot to achieve. There's a lot to push forward. If we want to see how important, what's the level of importance we give to this prayer, think about it. If our phone is buzzing or ringing in the middle of that prayer, how quickly do we pull it out when we finish? Inshallah, we do finish it before we pull it out, right? But how quickly do we pull out that phone as soon as that prayer finishes? As if that's the real conversation that I couldn't wait to have. And the one that I was just now doing was not really that important to me. On that note, why isn't it on, silent? We can turn our phones onto silent while we pray. It's not that big of a deal, right? Prayer isn't that long, right? There was a time period that existed before the phones when people actually had to travel to each other to talk, right? It's not as if every person has this extreme emergency that needs to be met at that moment, and if it doesn't happen, then the world will collapse. No. Who are we deceiving? That's not us. That's not how our lives work. It's okay. Even if something happens, it's okay. Someone will take care of it. Allah SWT will handle it. It'll be okay. But that shows us, right? My point isn't like from now on, turn it on silent. I mean, that's obviously something we should do. And I like that. My point is something else though. Why aren't we doing it already? I'm not doing it already because the prayer isn't really that important to me. It's not something real to me. What's happening between that conversation between myself and Allah SWT is not really tangible to me. It's something so abstract, something I'm not even paying attention to. It's not even something that I can really concentrate on. Perhaps I don't even know what I'm saying. Do we know what we're saying in prayer? How many years and years and times have we said these words? Have we stopped and thought, well, maybe I should know what I'm saying? Right? It seems like almost like a no-brainer. Right? That's obvious. We should know what we're saying. And yes, everyone is on a trajectory. Everyone starts learning and is learning on their own pace. That's good. My point is perspective. It's not the actual sort of status of where we are right now. That's my point. That's not my point. My point is, what is our perspective? Am I on that path of trying to learn more? make it real? Or is that just mechanical movements for myself? Why is it that this happens? Why is it that it happens that if I am someone who truly accepts Islam, someone who truly has love for the Ahlul Bayt, all of these things are there. Why is it that my prayer is like this? Why is it that I'm not already like that? And if we boil it down, in one way or another, it seems like the answer usually goes to the ego and the self. In one way or the other. Sometimes in very subtle ways, sometimes in very, very overt ways. Right? Overt ways we see in the example of Shaitan. Right? He's told to bow in front of Adam. He says like, no. Like, I know more than God, basically, is what he's saying, claiming. Right? Contradiction in the statement itself, right? He's accepting that God is God, but he's saying that I know more. Right? That's very overt. Inshallah, that probably doesn't happen to any of us. But the subtle ways, well, in the subtle ways, we're plagued with the ego. Look at the direction of our lives. I'm speaking, not about any particular person. I'm talking about my own personal experiences, how I gauge myself. How I treat religion is something to be compartmentalized and sectioned off and put into the center in these sessions and gatherings. But it barely touches the rest of my life. It's as if like religion is something I sprinkled on top of a dessert. And that rest of the dessert is the real thing of my life. So the job that I have, the education that I'm pursuing, the friends that I have, my social circle and interactions, all of those things that I have within my life, it's as if those are the real things, and I'll just sprinkle some Islam on top of it. That's not how that works. It's not how that works. So we see that in order for us to have a more holistic image, that Islam has to be real to me. And I have to be actually achieving something in the perspective of Islam at each moment. And that only really happens if I'm looking at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as real. When we look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we see one of the things that have been said time and time again are the various attributes and characteristics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is described himself as throughout the Quran. What we don't pay attention to is the absoluteness of those statements. For example, we all know that, okay, we call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Al-Hayy, the living. But have we thought that when we're calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the living, we're negating that same attribute from ourselves? And so that means that we're the mayyit, we're the dead. When we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ghani, the needless, then we're saying the opposite. We're negating that from ourselves. That means that we're the faqir, we're the poor and the needy. As the ayah says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الناس أنتم الفقراء إلى الله والله هو الغني الحميد. O mankind, you are the poor, needy ones, dependent ones upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the needless and the praised. Each attribute that we're describing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a reminder of our utter and complete dependence on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look at it, children have the right of it. When they grow up, as they're growing up, as they're very young, you'll see that children in their perspective with their parents are like this, that they ask everything from their parents. And they expect that their parents can give anything and everything to them. Right? Even things that are impossible or logically contradictory. They want wings, they'll ask for wings. They want a unicorn, they'll ask for a unicorn. It doesn't matter to them. From their perspective, the parent seems like the entity that can give everything. That's how we should be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the reality of our relationship. Everything else that we have within this world, the glitter and glory of this world, is a deception. It's the wool that's been pulled over our eyes. That we own something. I'm in control of my destiny. I can determine it. It's my blood, sweat, and tears that I have, and that sort of gives me some sort of extra right or control over something. No. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Up to my thoughts, my breath, the heartbeat, every single thing. When that realization hits of that utter dependency, that's when a light bulb clicks open, shines, and realize that, okay, if that's my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I'm truly, utterly dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then no matter what I do, even if I'm disobeying Him, everything is still coming from Him. Everything is in His hands. There's no escape. لا يمكن الفرار من حكومتي. There's no possible of escape. It's not possible. If that's our perspective, that gives us all of the sufficient motivation that we need to change. When we see things in that light. But it's a constant struggle that we have to keep that in mind, to keep that kind of perspective. Instead, we sometimes play and twist things around. For example, right, we have this dua that maybe we say a lot of times in the qunut. We say, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Right? We say, oh my Lord, I ask you for the good in this world and the good in the next, and save us and protect us from the punishment of the hellfire. Right? It seems like a very straightforward and simple statement. Right? It's obvious. I want good now and I want good later. Right? That's basically what we're saying. But the problem comes with this. Good for later, sure. We sort of have an image of that. That means, heaven and paradise and all of the rewards and rivers and whatnot. Right? That, we have. That's something we somewhat understand. Good in this world, though. What do we define that as? Our mind immediately goes to, well, the money, the wealth, the riches, the ease, the comfort, the health, the family, everything, right? The house, the picket fence, all of those things, right? That's what we think of, right? And good in this world. And naturally so, right? That's what we think of as things that are good. But what makes them so good? Are these things inherently good? Is it that wealth and health in this world inherently makes me superior and better? No. We actually instinctively shy away from that. If I were to say that, guess what? That person is, dying of cancer. That means I'm better than them as a person. I'd probably be beat up by someone for saying that, right? Because it's nonsense, right? We wouldn't accept that. Same thing should apply for riches and wealth as well. I mean, health is something at least much more to do with what an actual person is than wealth is, right? But we should say the same thing about wealth. Inherently, it doesn't mean anything. It's what we do with it. What we do with the health, what we do with the sickness, what we do with the riches, what we do with the poverty that changes things. None of it is inherently good. Now, that doesn't mean, this does not mean at all that we shouldn't seek wealth and comfort and ease and health. No, we're commanded to seek them, and we should seek them. And we should try to provide them for each other. That's fine. But we also have to understand that there are times when that's not what's good for us. And ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who determines that. This beautiful line in Dua Iftitah, the dua that is daily repeated should be daily repeated in the month of Ramadan. It says, فإن أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. Right? It says, perhaps you've delayed what I've been asking you for because you know what's best for me. You know what's best for me in the end of affairs. And then the next line hits hard. It says, فَلَمْ أَرَ مَوْلًا كَرِيمًا أَصْبَرَ عَلَى عَبْدِ اللَّئِمْ مِنْكَ عَلَيَّ. I have never seen a more patient, giving, gracious Lord to a disobedient servant than you are with me. And I won't go through the next sentence, it'll make me cry, but it hits hard. Right? When you look at these dua, they hit hard. Right? This is one of the things that we have to pay attention to. These du'as are not just rituals, they're lessons, deep, deep lessons. I promise you, we could open one of these dua and talk about it for years and not be finished. One small dua. And it wouldn't be difficult to do so. Right? They have depths and oceans of depths within them. Anyway, that's a side point. What we're saying is this. What I perceive to be inherently good and useful might not be that way. It might not. Again, that's not something that's very difficult to accept. We inherently know that, right? We see it all the time, right? Every single teenager goes through that phase. Right? Hopefully it's the teenage phase, right? That whatever they want, right, is probably not going to be good for them. Right? Whatever they're hard set on is probably not what's in their best interest. And then they, inshallah, they come to a realization, right? Later on when they mature. They look back and they say, well, I was kind of dumb when I was doing those things. Right? That's something we accept. Why do we lose that as an adult? Why have we all just automatically assumed that just because I've gained a few more decades of experience, now I know everything about what's good for me? No. The tests that we're in, the trials and tribulations that we face, that is what's good for us. That doesn't mean that we don't change them. No. Perhaps we're in them to change. There's a poetry, like a very lengthy piece of poetry in Farsi that talks about a relationship. It's sort of like Romeo and Juliet, right? Layli wa Majnoon, right? This lengthy poetry saga basically about their relationship and how Majnoon, like he's crazy for Layli. Right? One of the pieces, I'll paraphrase it, I won't go into the Farsi. I'll paraphrase the thing. One of the stanzas of it says this basically. What's happening is this, is that, you know, Layli is basically almost like at a soup kitchen type thing deal. She's handing out soup to people, right? And like people are in a line. Majnoon is also in this line. So he's going, right? She's giving soup to everyone, filling each one of their bowls. When it gets to Majnoon's turn, she breaks his bowl, right? Instead of giving him soup. And so everyone starts to think that, okay, like he's going to be upset. But instead, Majnoon gets like hysterically happy, right? Absolutely like happy, out of his mind happy. They're like, what's wrong with this guy? They're like, she just broke your bowl. But he's like, well, don't you realize she didn't break anybody else's bowl? That means that she knows something about me. She has some special attention to me, right? And yeah, if we take it at its very surface level, it sounds like this crazy, delusional, love-struck fool, right? But it's a metaphor, right? It means something in terms of our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The trials and tribulations are another way for us to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Every moment that we have something that's difficult for us, it's an added opportunity for us to cry out more desperately to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not that we're not desperate in other times. We are. It's just that we've tricked ourselves. We've deceived ourselves with the appearance of wealth and health that we're not desperate. But in reality, we are. We're utterly desperate. It's those difficult times that trigger this awareness. And it shows a special attention. Why do we think we have specifically within our hadith that the imams and the prophets were the ones who faced the most difficulty? That Rasulullah faced the most difficulty out of anyone on the earth. It's for a reason. When we look at Imam Hussein al-Islam, the difficulties that he faced, well, on one side of it, it's the heights that he achieved. That's why Hazrat Zainab can say, Ma ra'aytu illa jamila. I saw nothing but beauty. It's from that perspective. She's describing what's being achieved. The pinnacle of humanity is being achieved. It's just we've confused things. We've thought that the pinnacle of humanity lies in these mean sort of glitter and glory of this world. But that's not it at all. A lot of time has passed, but I'll end with a few more points, inshallah. From the verse that I recited in the very beginning. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم من كان يريد العزة فلله العزة جميعا. Whoever desires honor, dignity, this sort of status, izzah, if you look at the very technical root word in Arabic where it comes from, it means this hardness, right? A hardness that cannot be defeated, cannot be sort of penetrated, right? It's al-qahir laysa bimaqhur, right? Someone who is victorious and cannot be overcome. Right? That's what al-izzah means, that kind of characteristic. If you want that, this ability of you're always dominant, supreme, then what does the ayah say? It says, know that all of izzah, all of supremacy, all of that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everyone, everything is with Allah. It's not with the riches, it's not with the health, it's not with the status, it's not with the children, it's not with the house, it's none of that. None of that has it. It's with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we achieve it? The ayah continues. It says, إِلَيْهِ يَسْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. It says, and to him ascends the good words or good statements, and the righteous actions elevates it. If we look at statements, the statements that we say, they're a reflection of our core beliefs and tenets. Because statements are never empty, words are never empty. They reflect a reality inside. And so saying that if we want to have access to this absolute pinnacle, supremacy, ultimate victory, then all of that is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do I achieve it? By first acknowledging reality, knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Allah. Acknowledge my position before Him. I'm the faqir, He's the ghani. Acknowledge that, and then naturally, not as some sort of random, abstract, weird thing that's been imposed on me as these laws I have to follow, but no, a natural corollary of this belief are the actions that follow. Amal al-salih, these good actions. That's the key to success. It's simple at its heart. Islam at its core is something simple. It's not something that's complicated in its tenets. It's not something complicated in its action. At its core, it's simple. Realize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and obey Him. Yes, there's infinite depths within those two statements. But what they are at its core is very, very simple. How does that change things for you and I? Many times as an individual, we understand things. We say, okay, obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I get it. I have to pray, I have to fast, I have to do zakat, khums, all these things. Right? I get it. Right? That's what I'm supposed to be doing. What about the other levels though? Right? Level of family, of community, of a global society, of all of existence. What about that? Looking at each type, we see that in an increasing circle, when we expand beyond ourselves, our responsibilities increase. What we're supposed to be doing is magnified. Our faults are also magnified. Our good actions are also magnified. That's why there's a hadith that says that if someone, right, it's a hadith, it's interesting. There's some hadith that we have that are repeated by several ma'asumin. And when you see that, usually it indicates and it stressed importance of what's being said. So this hadith that I'm quoting is one of those. The version that I'm quoting right now is from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Ma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says this, says that when there are two people who are arguing and have reached a point of like having a grudge with each other, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will curse one of them. Then he continues and says, and sometimes he'll curse both of them. And when he curses both of them, the madloom will say, the one who is oppressed, will say, why are you cursing me? Like, I'm the one who's being oppressed in this whole thing. And it will be responded to him, said to him, well, yes, you are oppressed, but what did you do to bury the hatchet? What did you do to end that argument? The Imam continues. He says, did the oppressed, not the oppressor, did the oppressed go to his own oppressor and say to them, I oppressed you? Saying this in order to finish that argument. If he hasn't done that, then there's still a right that that oppressor has over the oppressed. That's the extent of the rights that the mu'mineen, that the believers have over each other. To that extent. The reason is simple. What we're aiming for in this life is much, much beyond small grudges and things, whatever we could imagine having disagreements over. If the big picture between me and you is still Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's all that matters. I'm not talking about saying it by word, that's saying that just by saying that, oh, I'm a Muslim. I'm not saying that. But really, truly, sincerely, what I'm seeking is closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'm demonstrating that both through belief and action. And you're doing the same. And then an argument, something happens between us. Then we need to get over it. We need to get over it. It doesn't matter. That's the extent of the rights we have over each other. How many times have we seen families, communities broken through grudges, through minor disagreements that have no relevance to our big picture? Why are we taking it that seriously? The serious thing is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I can't get over myself for Allah, then what am I saying? How do I expect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to get over my things that I'm doing wrong? I'm constantly sinning and asking for forgiveness from Allah, and I expect Him to just, wipe that all out, when I can't just get over one small thing? Forget about small, huge thing. Think about this for a moment. Think about it. When Imam Hussein Islam is on the battlefield, not in the beginning, at the end, after every single companion has died, after his sons have been slaughtered, after his brothers have been slaughtered, after his nephews have been slaughtered, and he's on the battlefield himself, fighting, he's still telling them, still telling the enemies that, hey, look, what you're doing is wrong. You still have a chance to turn back. Those aren't empty words. That means that if someone were to have backed off then, he would accept it. Can you imagine the extent that the Imam is giving up and saying, letting go? What do we have in our lives that matches that in the slightest? That's the reality of what's happening in Karbala. That there's a goal being marched towards that's so absolute, so massive, that nothing, absolutely nothing, is in any way important next to it. How is it so easy for Imam Hussein to forgive Hur? Hur didn't do something small. It's his fault they're in Karbala. It's his fault that they're all going to die. The Imam accepts him without a blink of an eye, without any hesitation. Can you imagine that? That's who we're trying to achieve. That's what we want to be like. So this is the homework for tonight. Right? Let's, before we go to sleep, think about our lives, our relationships, our interactions, our relationship in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and see where is it that it's actually real, where is it not? Where am I playing with myself, deceiving myself? Am I really really, am I really a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If that's the case, I should be able to see it in my personal life. I should be able to see it in my family life. I should be able to see it when I'm amongst my communities, with friends, non-Muslim friends. I should be able to see it everywhere. I need to point out the places where it's not there. Figure out those places. Then need to work on it. Let's not escape the guilt and just cover it up and imagine that it's all good and rosy. No. There are plenty of things that were good and we should be thankful for. But let's realize where we're deficient and work towards bettering that. That's the whole point. Inshallah, we'll stop here and mention a few words of musibah and move on, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts these few words. If anything that we said was against His will and something that was not appropriate, then we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to remove it from our hearts and minds and replace it with that which was truly beneficial and truly what was in His path. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Dear brothers and sisters, when we think of the tragedy of Karbala, sometimes we imagine the events and see them as a third party, as a bystander. Tonight, let's try to imagine ourselves as if we were there ourselves. Let's try to imagine ourselves in the shoes of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. Have we imagined that as the caravan is leaving Medina, that Imam Zain al-Abidin is also leaving his place of birth? He's leaving his home. And he's not leaving it alone. He also has his wife. He also has a young infant child with him. Have we imagined as he's going on this journey and he's seeing the pain and suffering that his father is suffering, what is going through his heart? But perhaps nothing matches that moment. There's a moment that comes on Ashura when Abu Abdullah al-Hussein turns to the right and the left and he sees that there is no longer anyone there to help, and he cries out, هل من ذاب يضب عن حرم رسول الله هل من موحد يخاف الله فينا. Is there anyone, any defender there to defend the haram of Rasulullah? Is there any monotheist? Is there anyone who believes in Allah that fears Him? Some narrations say that upon hearing this cry, that Imam Zain al-Abidin, despite being extremely sick and ill, struggles to his feet and comes out of his tent leaning upon a staff, saying that my brothers have gone, my uncle has gone, all have gone, but I'm still here and I need to defend my Imam. How difficult it is for him to have to bear knowing that after all of this will go, he will remain. That after all of them, all of his relatives have gone and sacrificed himself, that he will remain. A time comes after Ashura, on the 11th of Muharram, when the women and children in Imam Zain al-Abidin are gathered out onto the battlefield. They're marched out onto the battlefield, and on the battlefield they see that all of the bodies of the enemies, all of the bodies of the enemy soldiers have been treated with respect. They've been buried, their funeral rites have been completed, but the bodies of the Shuhada lie upon the plains of Karbala bare. According to some narrations, horses have trampled over these bodies. How difficult is it for Imam Zain al-Abidin to see the body of his father lie headless on those plains? But this isn't the end of the suffering of Imam Zain al-Abidin. On this day, on the 11th of Muharram, the caravan starts to move from Karbala. It's narrated that Imam Zain al-Abidin is put into chains. And specifically, it said that his hands are chained to his neck. Dear brothers and sisters, perhaps you've gone to Arba'in once. Perhaps you've walked between Najaf and Karbala. Kufa is right next to Najaf. The distance is perhaps around 80 kilometers. The narrations say, the historians say, that they took them 1 day to make that journey. For 1 day, Imam Zain al-Abidin is traveling those 80 kilometers in the heat, chained, no water, no shade. Think about ourselves when we make that walk in Arba'in. Every time we're tired, we stop, we rest. Every time we're thirsty, we have water. Every time we're hungry, there's food given to us. Every time we need rest, there's a mawqab we can sleep in. The caravan of Imam Hussein is different. When they enter Kufa, the people of Kufa don't recognize them at first. It's narrated an old lady is at the rooftop and asks them, "From what tribe are you prisoners from?" One of the ladies of the caravan responds by saying, "We're the haram of Rasulullah." She starts to cry and comes and brings chadars for the ladies. The people of Kufa, when realizing who these people are, start to cry. Imam Zain al-Abidin responds saying, "You're crying now? You're the ones who have killed us. You're the ones who have put us in this situation in the first place." But this isn't the end of these trials. There's a time that comes in the court of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad when the doors of the court blast open and a person storms out saying to the guards that you are all slaves and slave of a slave. The guards are taken aback. They say, "What is it that you've seen? What are you saying? What are you talking about? What gave you the audacity to say this about Ibn Ziyad?" He says, "You don't know what I've witnessed in this court. Ibn Ziyad as the head of Abu Abdullah, and he's striking the lips with a stick." But dear brothers and sisters, it's recorded in history that this person was blind. And so how hard Ibn Ziyad must have been striking the head of Abu Abdullah for him to be able to tell that this was what was happening in front of him. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. ماتم حسين يا حسين.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. What a wondrous scene, a flower in the plain. My wounded Lord Hussein lying there to die. Nothing does he see but his grandfather, his heavenly mother. Come here to our side. Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. The blood upon his face, the blood upon his neck, all still better than what will happen next. Soldiers crowded round, pointing to his throat. The Imam of his time, he lies upon the ground. Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. I'm Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. The dust upon your eyes, the feeling in your throat, the desperate children's cries, the screaming of women. But all within your mind is calling for Hussein. Your brother is in pain, and you must fly to him. Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. Zainab, run to him. One last time. Sakina at your feet. Look into her eyes. Does she realize what will now occur? The greatest of mankind will meet the cruelest end, along with his loyal friends, and who will now guard her? Zainab, run to him. Zainab, run to him. See him one last time. Zainab. Like a lioness worries for its young, you gaze from on a hill, your body's cold with stress. That body isn't his, that screaming isn't yours. You see his arms and chest not moving anymore. Two orphans on a plane, God knows how hurt they are. To Zainab and Hussein, so close but still so far. Zainab to him, Zainab run to him, Zainab run to him. See him one last time. Zainab run to him, Zainab run to him, Zainab run to him. See him one last time. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there, leave me there. Hussein, oh, Hussein, oh, Hussein. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا محمد بن عبد الله. السلام عليك يا علي بن أبي طالب يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام عليك يا علي بن حسين زين العابدين وقرة عين الناظرين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي باكر علم النبيين. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق البار الأمين. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاذب. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء. السلطان أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي أيها الجواد التقي. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا مظهر الإيمان. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسل الله مخرجك وظهورك، وجعلنا من أعوانك وأنصارك والمستشهدين بين يديك. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.